Has Iran just brought a ghost supertanker back into service as Karg Island nears storage capacity? Trump is taunting that if Iran can't move crude off Karg soon, its entire oil network could explode from within, crippling fields and pipelines for years. With exports choked, Tehran is being forced to revive a mothballed very large crude carrier just to park surplus barrels at sea and keep wells flowing. Calling it a matter of days before Iran's system breaks, Trump is betting storage stress at Karg will do what bombs haven't, bring Tehran to its knees. As the US hunts down Iran's oil tankers at sea, Tehran is scrambling to avoid a new crisis at home, running out of space to store its crude. Officials in Tehran have now brought a previously retired Very Large Crude Carrier, or VLCC, back into active service, effectively turning the old supertanker into extra floating storage. The decision comes amid growing concern that onshore tanks at Karg Island, Iran's main export hub, are nearing capacity as the US naval blockade chokes off normal export routes. Independent tanker tracking data suggests the ship was reactivated as a precautionary measure, giving Iran a safety valve if more outbound cargoes are blocked or seized. This storage scramble is unfolding just as Donald Trump warns that if Iran cannot move its oil, parts of its oil infrastructure could explode or be permanently damaged by being forced to shut in production.
Every story says, oh, Trump is under time pressure. I'm not, no. You know who's under time pressure? They are. Because if they don't get their oil moving, their whole oil infrastructure is going to explode. You know what that means? Because they have no place to store it. And because they have no place to store it, if they have to stop it, something happens that only Len can explain. Something happens underground that essentially renders it in very poor shape, and you never recover fully. You can recover 50, 60%, but you can never have it like it is right now. And they have a matter of days before that event takes place. So I'm not under any pressure whatsoever. We've never had so much ammunition. Our ships are loaded. I call them locked and loaded. They're locked and loaded.
All of this follows the latest US operation on April 23rd, when American forces seized a large tanker carrying Iranian crude in the Indian Ocean, further tightening the noose around Tehran's oil revenues. Despite the extension of the US-Iran truce, the maritime standoff between the two sides has intensified further, with American forces now seizing Iranian-linked tankers well beyond the Strait of Hormuz. On April 23rd, the US military seized a large crude carrier, MT Majestic, carrying Iranian crude in the Indian Ocean, marking one of the most significant intercepts of the Shadow Fleet campaign. US Attorney Jeanine Pirro stated that the seized ship, MT Majestic, carried approximately 1.9 million barrels of Iranian oil, reflecting the scale of Iran's maritime export network. Pirro also noted that the similarly seized tanker MT Tehran, taken earlier in the week, also carried roughly 1.9 million barrels of Iranian crude, underscoring a pattern of high-volume captures. The location of the Majestic seizure was close to where the Tehran was boarded earlier in the Indian Ocean, suggesting that US forces are focusing on a specific corridor used by Iran-linked tankers. Pirro added that her office has executed some of the nation's most complex seizure warrants, positioning these operations within a broader legal framework for targeting sanctions-busting vessels. The attorney also hinted at the earlier seizure of oil tankers carrying Venezuelan crude, including the ship's skipper, Bella 1, and Veronica. The US Department of War justified the operation as an effort to intercept ships that are alleged to be violating sanctions and supporting Iran's war-related revenue flows. These seizures form part of a wider American crackdown on Iran's so-called Shadow Fleet, a network of tankers that operate under false flags or limited identification to evade scrutiny. The broader aim is to squeeze Iran's oil revenues, which have long served as a critical source of funding for Tehran's military programs and regional activities. The US military has claimed that its blockade and interdiction measures have so far forced at least 33 ships to turn back or return to port while attempting to navigate the Strait of Hormuz area. The latest seizure of the Majestic came shortly after President Trump claimed total US control of the Strait of Hormuz and issued shoot and kill orders against vessels ignoring the blockade. The US military's claim that it would not allow Iranian ships to transit through the Hormuz Strait has been sharply contradicted, as new reports suggest that multiple Iranian-linked vessels have in fact passed through these strategic waters. Maritime intelligence agency Lloyd's List has asserted that dozens of Iranian ships have successfully crossed the Hormuz Strait, undermining Washington's narrative of a tight and impenetrable blockade. Data compiled by Lloyd's List, and reported by the outlet Iran International on April 20 ahead of the truce's expiry, paints a very different picture from US military briefings and official statements. At least 26 ships connected to Iran's so-called shadow fleet are reported to have bypassed the US blockade on Tehran's ports, slipping through the cracks of enforcement and continuing their journeys. The reports cited vessel tracking data that showed continued tanker movements tied to Iranian trade, indicating that energy shipments and commercial routes have remained active despite public claims of severe restrictions. Several oil and gas tankers carrying Iranian energy exports are said to have departed the Gulf despite the curbs, suggesting that Iran's export lifelines are far from completely severed. Iran's shadow fleet is described as a network of aging or lightly regulated ships specifically used to evade international sanctions and keep vital oil and gas revenues flowing. These ships typically operate with obscured ownership structures and masked tracking data to move oil and gas under the radar, making it difficult for authorities to monitor, intercept, or halt their activities. The US Navy Secretary chose a striking farewell message, sharing a teaser clip of the new Trump-class warship as his final post on social media. In his post on X, John C. Phelan declared that the BBGX platform was designed and built for the fight ahead, signaling it as the spearhead of America's future sea power. Just hours after that message went live, the Pentagon announced that Phelan would be leaving his position as Navy Secretary, with his departure taking effect immediately. The US Navy has unveiled an eye-watering $377.5 billion budget proposal for fiscal year 2027, aimed at massively expanding its future fleet. Reports say the plan, released by the Department of the Navy, represents roughly a 23% increase over the previous year's funding levels, underscoring just how urgent leaders see the naval buildup. At the heart of the blueprint are the so-called Trump-class battleships, designated BBGX, which are being pitched as the answer to China's rapidly growing naval power. The documents openly reference the Chinese Navy's surge in shipbuilding and expanding global maritime influence as the key strategic driver for this next-generation fleet. Under the broader Golden Fleet initiative, the Navy ultimately envisions fielding between 20 and 25 new major warships over the long term. In its first phase, the program calls for the construction of 2 advanced capital ships, led by a new flagship to be named USS Defiant. However, the timeline is anything but immediate. The lead ship, USS Defiant, is only expected to begin construction in the early 2030s. When they finally sail, these warships are designed to be larger, faster, and more powerful than any previous generation of US naval vessels. The Trump-class hulls are expected to carry hypersonic missiles, high-energy laser weapons, and advanced railgun systems as part of their core arsenal. Navy officials have also confirmed that the BBGX line is a direct successor to the DDGX next-generation destroyer program, effectively moving from destroyer to battle cruiser-style firepower. As part of their strike package, the ships are planned to field nuclear-capable, sea-launched cruise missiles, dramatically expanding their reach and deterrent value. Navy leaders argue that, taken together, the program will deliver unprecedented firepower for the United States across multiple oceans and conflict zones. Beyond the headline battleships, the modernization push also includes an expansion of frigates and a range of support vessels, aimed at building a more balanced but heavily armed future fleet. Amid the ongoing Iran war and its mounting pressures, the Trump administration's top civilian official in the US Navy has suddenly announced his immediate exit from the position. The Pentagon, on April 22nd, officially announced that Navy Secretary John Phelan has left his high-profile position within the Department of Defense. A Pentagon spokesman confirmed that Phelan departed from his critical role as Navy Secretary with immediate effect, effective right away. Hung Cao, who previously served as the Navy Undersecretary in a key supporting role, will now step up to become the acting Navy Secretary. This sudden departure came just one day after Phelan had addressed the Navy's annual conference in Washington, D.C., catching many by surprise. Notably, Phelan hadn't served in the military himself or held any prior civilian leadership role in defense before taking this top Navy job. Phelan's unexpected departure came right after the ouster of several senior generals amid the US military's ongoing struggles in the Iran war. War Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the Army's top officer, General Randy George, from his command position on April 1st. 2 other top generals in the Army were also removed from their important positions as part of the recent shakeup. John Phelan, who served as the Secretary of the Navy in a top civilian leadership role, has now departed from his position amid recent turmoil. General Randy George, the U.S. Army Chief of Staff responsible for overall Army operations, was fired from his high-ranking command position. Major General William Green Jr., the Army's chief of chaplains overseeing spiritual and morale support, has been removed from his key leadership role. General David Hodden, commanding general of the Army Transformation and Training Command focused on modernizing forces, was also ousted from his position. Phelan was a major donor to Trump's campaign and also held an advisory position in a non-profit organization. The non-profit, Spirit of America, supported the defense of Ukraine as well as the defense of Taiwan. The U.S. Navy Secretary's departure came amid the U.S. military's failing blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. On the very day Phelan's exit was announced, Iranian forces seized 2 Israel-linked ships in a bold escalation.